Well, good morning and welcome to our city council meeting. It's great to have you with us. For those that aren't here in person, I'm sure there's several watching online, and always great to engage the community. We're going to start our meeting with an invocation and following that a pledge of allegiance. I don't know if I've seen the Reverend LaShawn Tarkington here, but we always have our trusty backup, our own Reverend Charlie Davidson. Charlie, would you provide us an invocation, sir?
I would. I appreciate it. Good morning. Could you bow with me as we pray? God, I just thank you for this time that we have to gather as city leaders, as a community. Lord, as we continue to lead this great community here in Wichita, Kansas, in the heart of America. God, I pray that you continue to just give wisdom and direction to our city council, our mayor, our department directors, our city manager, as they continue to lead and direct this great city in all different aspects, whether it's in recreation or public safety or transit or whatever it may be. God, continue to just impress upon us the wisdom that we need, Lord, to lead this city in a way that you would design it to be. God, it says in Matthew 5:14 that we are the light of the world and that a city on a hill cannot be hidden. And I pray that we be that city. God, I pray that we be that city of light, that we're that city that can't be hidden, that city that everybody looks to as an example of leadership, an example of doing things according to your direction. Lord, we just pray for all this. Pray for these leaders. Pray for this meeting today as we continue to go about this business. We pray that we make your business our business. Pray and ask all this and lift this up to you. In Jesus' precious and holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Charlie, you are outstanding. Thank you. We have approval of the minutes of October 8th, 2019. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I move that we approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. We have a couple of proclamations this morning. So our first proclamation is for International Earleen Awareness Week. If Mike Smith and Catherine Hay can join me. I think we've done this proclamation several years now. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Mike, how are you? Good morning. It's good to see you. So I have a proclamation that reads, whereas approximately 15% of the general population suffers from Earleen syndrome, which affects daily function due to the brain's inability to process visual information. Whereas children who do not learn to read adequately by the third grade face higher risk, and whereas the cost to society of grown-ups not being able to read is disastrous, 75% of the unemployed have reading or writing difficulties. And whereas according to the U.S. Department of Justice, the risk between academic failure and delinquency, violence, and crime is welded to reading failure. And whereas the Earleen method has been demonstrated to be an effective treatment of reading difficulties that improves not only reading, but also copy and math and overall learning. And whereas we are fortunate to have an Earleen clinic celebrating its 25th anniversary in Wichita, Kansas. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Jeff Longwell, the mayor of the city, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim October 14th through the 18th of 2019 as International Earleen Awareness Week, and call upon citizens, parents, public and private agencies, businesses, hospitals, schools, and colleges in the support to support efforts to increase awareness of reading difficulties and of the Earleen method, to provide early screening for those with symptoms in reading and to increase support for those individuals and families coping with the Early syndrome. And I'm going to let you share some words.
Thank you very much. Would you like to start?
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Smith, and I'm head of MSE Creative Consulting based here in Wichita. We help science-based businesses grow and better serve their clients. And one of our clients is Dr. Catherine Hay, who is suffering from laryngitis this morning. So she asked me if I would introduce her, which I am happy to do, and she's going to say a few words.
Well, maybe more than a few, but good morning. I would like to thank the Wichita City Council for this proclamation celebrating both the International Erlen Awareness Week and my 25th year as a diagnostician for the Erlen method. The Erlen tagline is, "Where the science of color transforms lives." In the years since I became a diagnostician, I have helped 3rd and 4th graders, ACT and SAT takers in secondary school, middle-agers retraining for new job opportunities, older adults fearing loss of driving privileges, and veterans returning from service with traumatic brain injury and migraines. We had an article on migraines in this morning's paper. Recent articles in local and national media have begun to focus on 3rd and 4th graders unable to profit from reading instruction. So I eagerly return to my roots, helping these students. I also train screeners to identify problems that young readers are either unaware of or reluctant to share with their teachers. The occasion of this proclamation allows me to publicly differentiate between a dyslexia diagnosis and a diagnosis of Erlen syndrome, which is an important part of my service. By doing so, we can better treat young students and more quickly get them on the road to learning. Thank you for the opportunity to make Wichita more aware of this service.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Our next proclamation is for Family Promise Week, and as Carrie Corliss makes it down, I'll ask the Vice Mayor to come down. The Vice Mayor has been hosting a function for Family Promise Week, I think, every year for the last several years. So, Vice Mayor, I'm going to let you read this.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Good morning.
Whereas in October 2016, Family Promise of Greater Wichita began operations dedicated to helping the most vulnerable among us, children, and families who are temporarily homeless. And whereas Family Promise supports numerous congregations in our area's faith community, which provides the facilities to house and feed and guest families, thereby making a real difference in the lives of their neighbors in need. And whereas believing that every child deserves a home, Family Promise of Greater Wichita, it's more than 2,000 volunteers empower families in making their transition from homelessness to sustainable independence. And whereas over the past 3 years, Family Promise of Greater Wichita has served more than 62 families on their path to secure, affordable housing and expanding programming in 2020 to serve twice as many families. Now for there be it resolved that Mayor Jeff Longwell, Mayor of the City of Wichita, along with Wichita City Council, do proclaim October 20th through the 27th Family Promise Week in Wichita. And very excited about this. I want to give them a plug. I know they want to get into this too, but we have a function going on Wednesday, November 13th at the Boathouse. Is it 6 to 9? Is that correct?
14th, but yes.
Okay, 14th, thank you. But I'm very excited about it. Myself and Officer Nate Schwedall from the Homeless Outreach Team have emceed that on this event for, I think this is our 3rd year. So very excited about this. This is a very worthy cause, and I'll let Carrie get up here and speak a little more. Thank you.
Thank you. So Family Promise Week is being celebrated not just here in Wichita, but nationwide in over 200 communities where there's a Family Promise affiliate. During the week, we hope that you will give thought and attention to the fact that families with children make up about 35% of this nation's homeless population, and that around 2,500 children were homeless in Greater Wichita over this last year. During Family Promise Week, please share and like our Facebook posts that raise awareness so that you can know how to be part of the solution, because you are part of the solution. 47 congregations of faith across Greater Wichita's faith community have shared their time and resources to help families in need, making meals, reading to guest children, driving the van, and even spending the night in their church building, and this is making a real difference. Wichita, thank you for keeping families together while they work to get back on their feet. So far in 2019, we've provided shelter, meals, and hope to 26 families. That's 53 children, and we'll be moving to a larger day center soon, thanks to a partnership with St. John's Episcopal Church here in downtown Wichita. So with this move, we'll serve more families with safe shelter before the cold of winter sets in. You can help transform the lives of children and families by volunteering your time and talent and resources. You can also, as Vice Mayor Blueboss said, attend our gala on November 14th, where he and Officer Nate will MC. Tickets are discounted during Family Promise Week. Thank you again for helping children right here in Wichita to go from homeless to hope. It matters because every single child in our community deserves to have hope and a home. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, can you call the next item?
Lisa Finch, remembering Andrew Finch.
Is Lisa Finch here this morning? I don't believe she has made it. You want to call the next speaker?
Derek Jackson Bay, resolution with the City of Wichita Police Department regarding his deceased wife, Karen Jackson.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Council, City Wichita members, namely Mr. Brandon, for addressing the issues that I brought before the City of Council concerning my wife and the Wichita Police Department in 2012, which my wife was shot. I have a conviction and I have a duty and an obligation to make sure that my grandkids is going to be okay. They're not okay right now. As a previous speaker was speaking about children that's homeless and children in need, I'm going to come right behind the lines of the same thing, but I'm speaking about my family. I'm speaking about my grandchildren that have no grandmother. Now, I'm not here to point a finger or place blame. I'm here to try to maybe reach a solution, a resolution, maybe a remedy. And I try to be as diplomatic about this as I can. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you again, Mr. Brandon Johnson, because you're over the district that I'm in. And I thank you, appreciate your time, and your concern towards this matter. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consent agenda items 1 through 8.
On the consent agenda items 1 through 8, are there any items that need to be pulled for clarification or discussion? Seeing none, I move that we approve consent agenda items 1 through 8.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated October 14th, 2019.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lane, Department of Finance, here to present the October 14th Board of Bids. First engineering bid we have is sanitary sewer improvements to serve the ranch 2nd edition. Recommendation is McCullough Excavation for $132,210. 2019 OP3 Street Repairs Phase 4. Recommendation is Barclay Construction for $352,900. Downtown fiber and signalization upgrades. Recommendation is to defer to October 21st Board of Bids. Mobile printers and hardwares defer to October 21st. Orchard Park Recreation Center flooring. Recommendation is Tom Reps Flooring Perfect LLC for $94,674. Medium voltage infrastructure improvements. Recommendation is A&H Electric Incorporated for $3,133,864. That's all the bids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, I move that we approve the bids as mentioned.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Public hearing and issuance of industrial revenue bonds, River Vista LLC.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for the issuance of industrial revenue bonds for River Vista LLC. On October 8th of 2013, the City Council approved a development agreement with River Vista LLC, which included a letter of intent for the issuance of industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $24 million. This was for the development of a 202-unit River Vista apartments on the river with the boats and bikes, public access, and a public parking deck. It also included was the redevelopment of the Arkansas Riverbank and the Delano Park with a floating boat dock and decorative retaining wall. The property is located at 150 North McLean, which is the intersection of First Street and McLean. This aerial, you can see First Street running along the top of the aerial, McLean coming in at an angle, and the Arkansas River on the right-hand side of this aerial. River Vista LLC is now requesting the issuance of IRBs in an amount not to exceed $24 million. The bonds will be placed with the developer. The issuance of IRBs was for a sales tax exemption only on this development. These are some images of the exterior of the project. On the right, you can see some of the improvements that were part of the riverbank improvements. The images here on the left are a game room where the residents of the project can interact, and on the right is one of the units. And this is also, on the left is a living room for the unit, and on the right is a kitchen for one of the units. And this is an image of the pool deck. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $24 million and authorize the necessary signatures. And I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Tim, can you go back to one of the aerials that you had displayed there of the river improvements? I know that's one, but keep going, yeah. Keep going back. So there, so I continue to get confusion from the public that they don't realize that all of those improvements along that riverbank are still public. And so from the river edge to, we don't have a laser, but to really
the development.
The development wall. So all of those pathways are public pathways there.
Correct.
I would guess it's maybe about 90 feet from the river's edge to the.
Could
so be. The developer's here and they're going to tell me. 120 feet. So we have 120 feet of public space that the public, I guess, still doesn't realize it's public space. And then as you mentioned that, we used to call it McLean Park. Do we still? Delano Park is all kind of an improved outdoor amphitheater And we had the floating stage there for open streets, and it worked really well. They had some concerts during open streets, but all of that is public space. It does not belong to River Vista.
Correct.
So just wanted to reemphasize that. If there's no other questions, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Anything else you'd like to correct? Well, we'll bring discussion back to the bench, and I think this is in Councilmember Claycomb's district, so we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for making that clarification on the public open spaces. I think that's really important, and we did have a great time down there at Open Streets at Delano Park. So I'd like to move that we take staff recommended action.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Lease of city-owned parking spaces in the parking garage located at 121 South Emporia.
Good morning, Mayor, members of City Council. Mark Elder with the Office of Urban Economic Development. For the record, the item before you, there's a developer that has under contract the building at 423 East Douglas, and it's the former Legacy Antiques building. They have plans to renovate that 30,000 square foot building into a mixed use, predominantly office and retail are the plans right now. But as part of that plan, they would also like to make sure that they have parking for tenant attraction. The aerial here shows the relationship between the Legacy building, which is in yellow, as well as the garage that the lease is being considered for, which is directly south of there at 121 South Emporia. Just want to kind of give you some examples of the status of the building that they're going to buy, and then they are going to be renovating this entire building of the Legacy Antiques. This is the north face of the building, and on this side is the east. Directly south of that is basically an alley between the garage and that building. The lease before you is up to 108 spaces for up to 50 years. With that, it includes a 36-month option to take down all those spaces. So when the developer purchases their building, they would at that point be the $5,000 option price, which just goes to the city for the option. And then within 18 months of that acquisition, they would be required to take down a minimum of 52 spaces. They'll have 18 months to take down those remaining spaces for up to the 108. With that, the first term will start at our current group rate, which is $35 per space per month. And then there will be an additional 9 5-year options with that. There will be no less than that group rate, but there will be at the current group rate. So we'll never go below the $35, but if the group rate goes up due to market demand, then they would be paying that new rate. And an additional term with that is for the last 25 years of that option, if the city does have another public purpose where that garage is no longer, structure is being no longer used as a garage, we would have the option to move those spaces out, but find another location that the city can provide for the remaining term of those options. With that, the minimum estimated revenue for that full term with the base rate of that 35, so it could go up, would be that $2.2 million. Currently, that garage has been underutilized ever since the state offices were vacated in 2015. There are 2 contracts that are with that right now. They actually have not been taken down as well, but they are committed for up to 120 spaces for the Hilton Garden Inn and the Douglas and Emporia project across the street where they recently removed the building has another up to 100 spaces. So 220 out of 650, there is capacity to add that the additional 108 spaces and still would only be about half capacity. With that, there is a representative from the development group in the audience to answer any questions, and I will stand for any questions as well.
Any questions? Councilmember Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark, just to be clear, the revenue for this, would that go into the general fund?
I believe it goes into the parking revenue fund.
Parking revenue fund? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. And this is in Councilmember Johnson's district.
Thanks, Mayor.
Turn it over to you.
Alrighty, I am happy to see some more utilization out of this space, so with that, I would move that we take staff's recommended action.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
2020 special liquor tax allocation.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Angela Cadillo with ComCare of Sedgwick County here on behalf of the Liquor Tax Coalition to present funding recommendations for your consideration. Kansas statute authorizes the collection of liquor tax and requires funding allocation to programs for the prevention and treatment of substance abuse. The Liquor Tax Coalition includes a broad membership of professionals with diverse experience across treatment and prevention community. The goal of the coalition, and I'll just read it here, is to reduce substance abuse and its harmful effects through effective prevention and treatment programs for residents of the city of Wichita. This is just a quick timeline of the action taken, but basically you can see here that the coalition worked together to compile a request for proposal, which was then released by the city's purchasing department in May of this year. There were 18 proposals that were received from 10 agencies, requesting a total of $1,960,809, which was about $716,000 over what was available for allocation. A review committee of Liquor Tax Coalition members looked over the proposals and developed the recommendations that we'll present today. They looked at mandatory elements that you see here, and these are things that would be common to all City of Wichita proposals. And then, of course, program content and measurement. Throughout the evaluation process, the committee also looked at the diversity of proposals submitted, community needs, including any gaps or potential gaps in services, the purpose of the funding, and how to make the most effective use of the dollars available in that context, and the proposing program's use of evidence-based practices. So with that, this is the list of proposed programs that the Liquor Tax Coalition is recommending for funding at this time. I won't go through and read them all, but you can see that the funding recommended does total the amount available for allocation. And the next slide I have for you is the recommended action, which is to approve the 2020 allocation recommendations and authorize necessary signatures. And with that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions at this point? Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. On slide 5 and in the agenda report, there's a reference to strong outcome-based measurements, but in the actual recommendations for funding, those aren't there. So could you give me an example of something that we use? It has a lot of inputs, you know, or how many people will be served, but how do we make sure that there are outcome-based measures?
Thank you for asking. When they develop the contracts would have specific outcomes that they would be looking at. Those would all have been submitted with the request for proposal. So when the vendor submits their proposal, they indicate what they would like to see and how they believe those would be accomplished. And then there is monitoring that takes place throughout the contract. There are quarterly site visits, and then a report is provided to the Liquor Tax Coalition, who oversees. If there are any concerns, then those would be taken back to the finance department, and any corrective actions that would need to be put forth are worked through that process.
Okay, thank you very much.
And let me follow up on that before I hand it off to Councilmember Johnson. There are several requests in here where we're not filling any dollar amount. I take it the committee looks at the outcomes and bases their opinion on past performance then.
Past performance can be a factor. The strength of the proposal also can be a factor. And then there is some competition in some of these areas. There's only one vendor needed for some of these things, such as the continuum of care.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
So it is, and I don't need to get into the particulars of why several of these that we had funded in the past were denied any dollars. I trust that the committee looked at all of that information and came up with their suggestion.
That is correct.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thanks, Mayor. I actually had two questions. The first is, how are these opportunities distributed to the public to know that this funding's available so they could apply for it?
It is through the typical City of Wichita RFP process, and as I'm not intimately familiar with that, I may have to lean on finance to answer your question.
Okay. I know that process. I just wanted to know if there was anything different. My second question is there a possibility we could receive updates on this? Councilmember Claycomb was talking about the outcomes, but today we're just approving funding, but not really looking at how successful these programs are. What are the results? I mean, I think that's something that would be great to be shared with the public.
From my understanding, the Liquor Tax Coalition is put together and authorized by the City Council, so I would imagine that you would have any options to get reports. There may be some reports on contracts that is done through purchasing.
Does purchasing get regular reports from these agencies?
Mayor, council members, there was until recently, we received, I think, quarterly reports, our office did, and what we can do is go ahead and reinstate that and make sure the mayor and council receive copies.
Awesome, thank you.
That would be of benefit, I believe. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, I would move that the City Council approve the Special Liquor Tax Coalition 2020 funding recommendations and direct that the provider contracts be developed for the recommended allocations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Funding for the Aquatics Master Plan.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. My name is Brian Hill. I run O.J. Watson Park in the Aquatics Program for the City of Wichita Parks and Rec Department. We're here today to talk about the funding for the Aquatics Master Plan. The Aquatics Master Plan will guide more than $22 million in investments over the next 2 years for pool and water playground improvements. The City Council approved the plan on June 4th, 2019. They asked us to bring back final plans to show the designs moving forward. Design Council reviewed Phase 1 aesthetics enhancements on October 7th, 2019. As a reminder, these are the locations that we are focusing on. These pools and splash pads are broken down into 2 phases. Phase 1 will be commenced next year with 3 pools and 3 splash pads. With the following phase, the following year, once again, 3 pools and 3 splash pads. The renovated pools for Phase 1 are Ailey, McAdams, and Orchard. The water playgrounds for Phase 1 are Boston, Edgemoor, and Evergreen. Those are the locations that we'll be focusing on today. Here is a design of Ailey Pool. A couple things I want to point out about all of the pools that we're renovating. The filtration system is being changed over in all sites. We're moving from defiltration to a sand filter. It's extremely helpful for our staff. It cuts down on time. It's also a great system on keeping the pools nice and clean. All the pools will have ADA upgrades to make them ADA accessible. Ailey's special because this is kind of our competition pool. We're keeping the 6-lane system so we can handle swim meets, hold big swim practices. One thing that we wanted to do is all the pools have kind of a boxed-in area with their fences. In this situation, the area of the fence has been pushed out further away from the pool. It allows for some fun lounging areas. Some artificial turf areas have been added. We've got the shade structures added to keep people nice and safe from the sun. Some fun amenities that have been added to this location are the drop slide. The wading pool area is going away in exchange for a kind of a water playground splash pad area. Then you see some of the existing slide is going to remain. One of the really fun elements of this pool is a signature sculpture, a turtle, one of the giant turtles that actually used to roam this area back many years before we started. This is going to be a nice signature piece that's going to be very visible, seen off of the street from Seneca. It's going to help identify this pool, and it's going to tie in some very interesting educational opportunities as well as adding a fun thing for people to look at. As you can see here, we have some artist-infused items that go into the wall, retaining wall that we're already adding. Shows some prehistoric bones and fossils and some things that were found in this area back in Kansas many millions of years ago. So I think it's very exciting that we add in some educational pieces as well, providing aquatics. This is McAdams Pool. McAdams, one of the things that we wanted to stay true with McAdams is the great architecture that was already existing. Once again, this fence has been pulled out just a little bit to add a little bit more area for people to relax. Artificial turf area has been added again on the item 21. The biggest enhancement of this pool is the changing of the entry into the shallow area. It's a big, open, zero-depth entry that has some fun play elements for people to enjoy. We're adding shade structures back into the existing concrete coffers that are located at this pool. We're also adding a very interesting and exciting light element. So there's already these wonderful pillars at the site. We're adding these light elements that will kind of enhance the location. They'll be visible. You can even see them from the 135 highway. Some of the fun features added as well are the water slides. Once again, we're going to have a little water splash area over by the current wading pool. There's an example of some of the zero-depth entry play features that kids can play on. And one thing we're super excited about is having shade structures actually in the pool so people can enjoy the water yet still stay safe from the sun. One of the biggest challenges that we tackled with this project, and we're excited for this solution to the problem, is the French entrance at McAdams. That gate was just kind of foreboding. It wasn't a great way to let people in. People like nice, open, easy access. The new gate system is actually going to be one that's going to have some designs to it. It's going to be very exciting to look at, but instead of it just having to be closed down, you can't see it. When the gate opens, it actually slides across from the building, so you can still see this cool art piece throughout when it's open, but it also makes this nice, big, wide opening area. It's much more inviting to the pool, welcoming our visitors. This is Orchard Pool. Once again, we're just pulling the fence away from the pool area, adding some artificial turf. We've added some shade structures. One thing that the neighborhood's extremely excited about is we're putting the slide back in. The slide was here years ago, but we had to take it away. This one's going to be focused on with an orchard theme. It's what it's named for. There's going to be an interesting signature sculpture, the trees. It's going to have fun shadow elements as the day goes on that people can enjoy and watch. Like I said, the slide going back in is one of the big highlights that the neighborhood is extremely excited about, as well as the climbing wall. More shade areas for the people to enjoy. Some of the hidden surprises that we're excited about this location are some of the birds that you'll find in this area, as well as, once again, we've added art into the retaining walled areas. Going to the splash pads, this is Boston, the aviation theme. We have added some artificial turf berms. This is allow the people that they can kind of lounge around, play in the water, not be in the water. Bench swings. There kind of falls in some elements where you can kind of see a little bit more designed. The image on your top left is the lifting spots. We'll have the waters that'll spray out. Instead of the kites, though, we'll have the actual planes that we're here in Wichita that will be designed on the top of there. It's a kind of the artist drawn picture below it. It kind of gives you a little bit more visual of what that was going to look like. You see have a fun little play area, the climb that kids can enjoy, the trainer plane, as well as the bench seatings. This is Edgemoor. Edgemoor was a unique challenge. It's such a large space to put splash pads in. There's actually basically two splash pads in one. You have the area on the right, kind of the fishing dock area, that's going to be more geared towards the younger children, while you have the area on the right was kind of the waterworks. This is kind of like the water cycle. The old wading pool area is going to have a big shade structure. It could be a good rental space for parties to enjoy. And you have the stream which connects the two locations together with water will be kind of slowly flowing down to the filter system that kids can get in, play around with, and splash around. Kind of that picture up on the top kind of shows you what that meandering stream is going to look like. The waterworks structure is located right below that. Once again, some very fun shade structures and design elements. This is Evergreen. Evergreen has the Mesoamerican theme. You've got the shield there. We're adding once again, a little area just north to the side of it where people can lounge, relax. There's a kind of a temple area that's going to have a slide that people can play on. This gives kind of some better design features showing like what it's going to look like. You've got the big sculpture. You've got the mask that kids can run through with water falling on it. You'll have these interesting designs all around the shield element with plenty of seating and shade.
Mayor and council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. I wanted to talk briefly about construction phasing and schedule, current cost estimates, and overall project budgets for everything that you just saw Brian talked about in phase one. So phase 1A, which again is the pools for Ailey, McAdams, and Orchard, we are scheduled to open bids on November 15th. Phase 1B, which is the Boston, Edgemore, and Evergreen water playgrounds, we would open bids the following week on November 22nd. Right now, we're scheduling those for contract completion dates prior to Memorial Day to be ready for the 2020 season. With where we are at in mid-October, it's going to be a challenge, but we've done some things, put some things in place to help with that. We've talked to contractors about needing to team up and do everything they can to make that work so that we can have those back open for the season. The phase 2 projects, 2A again, is the College Hill, Harvest, and Municipal Pools. 2B is the Linwood, Harrison, and Plainview water playgrounds. Those projects will be returned to the council sometime at a later date to do the same thing we're doing today for approval of aesthetic enhancements and the budget to finish the project. We would expect work on those to take place then late next year into early 2021 so that we can minimize the impact to the users across the system. One thing I did want to mention is that staff interviewed and selected a list of pre-qualified contractors specific to this type of work with pool basins, with the type of facilities that we are building. So we have a pre-qualified list of contractors. It's a good list of contractors. They are the only ones that can bid on the work. We talked to them specifically about the schedule and what might be needed for that. This is something that we think will really help with the opportunity to get the product that we need and to get it done in time. Looking at cost estimates, this is a list of all 12 facilities in alphabetical order. The red is what's phase 1, and then the balance of the black is phase 2. So you can see that we've got the 6 pools, the 6 splash pads. We've got a base cost, which is just under $17.3 million. The artistic cost, which is just under $1.5 million total at this time based on current estimates, for a total estimate of $18.7 million. So there are some other costs associated with a project this size that I'll get to in a minute, but I want to make sure you saw this of where we're at on current estimates. One thing I do want to mention real quick, you'll see under the artist cost that there's 5 facilities shown. As you had heard previously, the splash pads, the water playgrounds inherently have aesthetics built into them. So we did not look at set-aside costs for those facilities. That was for the pools only. College Hill Pool does not currently show a separate cost for the aesthetic enhancements. We haven't quite got to that point yet on that pool. It's a little bit newer facility. We're expecting at this time that $1.5 million to be the total cost, and for part of that to be set aside for the aesthetic enhancements, if that makes sense. So $18.7 million right now is our current estimate for all 12 facilities for construction. By the time you look at our soft costs added beyond construction, we have almost $1.3 million for design. Construction management for a project this size is within the range of what we see for a percentage, around 5 to 6% for a project of this size. That includes our staff. Because of what it's going to take to get these projects done now by Memorial Day, we're going to have multiple staff in place to oversee the projects. We also will have Water's Edge, the design consultant for the project, engaged for their expertise and some training for operations staff once these facilities come online. There's a set aside for movable tables and chairs that the park department will acquire for the facilities needed. And then with the financing fees added in, right now we're currently at about $21.8 million with an overall budget of $22,150,000. So right now, everything looks good, we'll see how the first bids come in and then adjust accordingly if need be.
Let me
Recommended
interrupt.
action today for the.
Let me stop you for a
Yes, sir.
second. Go back to that slide. So when we say 1.25 million for construction management, and for the most part, you said you're using staff for construction management?
Yes, sir.
So the 21 or $22.15 million is actually money spent and allocated in our budget. So how do we allocate and spend funds when we're not adding staff, we're not adding staff time? How do we report the 1.25 million as allocated spent? Isn't that more like in-kind type services?
Mayor, members of the council, a portion of our engineering staff is supported through the CIP, and that's how we would be funding these positions. We went to that model several years ago in order to be able to fully staff the engineering department and make sure that we were treating the engineers as we would any other contractor or consultant. We're doing that instead of funding it through the general fund.
Okay, gets a little confusing because it's tax dollars spent, but spent for our own in-house, in-kind service.
Right, and we do that with street projects and other projects that where we have inspection work.
All right, go on.
So the recommendation before the council today is to initiate the $12,800,000 that's in the adopted CIP for 2019. Any funding that is not used for phase one will obviously stay in place then to move forward with the phase two projects. The city council had previously initiated $1,350,000 for the aquatics master plan, which will bring the revised budget to $14,150,000. As I mentioned before, additional funding is budgeted in the adopted CIP for 2020, and the phase two projects will be returned to the council at a later date for consideration of that funding. At this time, staff recommends the city council approve the phase one aesthetic design, revised budget, adopt the amending resolution, authorize the necessary signatures, and we would be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Elizabeth Bishop. I reside at 8518 East Long Lake Street, and I would just come before you today with a very serious, respectful, woo! I know this has been a long and relatively tortured process. I think that what you have before you today, and I do realize that there will be some future deliberations that will have to be made as this goes forward. I do believe that the benefits to the community will be self-evident in a very short period of time. I thank you for listening to us. I thank you for putting up with us. I want to really commend the Director of Parks and his entire staff for the enormous work that they put into it. And I've been before you before. You've heard me talk about the value of swimming lessons and the meaning that this has for citizens. I would just like to point out one other thing. In the summer months, there are a number of programs in this area that serve as latchkey programs for a lot of children through the school systems, both in Wichita and the surrounding communities. And these programs need to be able to use both the splash pads and, fortunately, the swimming pools. At a middle age, semi-middle age, or middle school age, they get bored on splash pads. And it's so important for them to also have swimming pools where they can practice their swimming and enjoy their summer. So thank you very much. I would be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions? Do not appear to be any. Thank you. Any other speakers? Going once, twice, we will bring the discussion back to the bench. Councilmember Johnson?
Thanks, Mayor. The woo-hoo was awesome. I do want to say thank you to our public works staff, our park staff, park board, our Water's Edge, local artists. Everything that I saw today was amazing. I think this is going to be great for the kids. Those are the ones that definitely had something to say about that. And you all know I have a lot of ideas. So on the gate at McAdams, it would be awesome just to consider a mural of all of the wonderful heroes that are honored at McAdams, from Antoine Carr to Barry Sanders, all of those folks. Just having their pictures would be great for young people to see, just a thought. And there's a lot of other local artists that would love to be a part of that too, especially those who helped design the basketball courts out there and implement that. But just wanted to throw that out there. I know it's a challenge, but thank you all for your hard work. This has been great.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question for staff. I know that this has been before Design Council, and I just want to make sure that what we've seen today, we're getting everything we've seen. I mean, representing all the features, all the artist elements, that what we're approving today, we're going to get all of that.
Yes, everything you saw today, you're going to get. The only small change is there was a question from Design Council about the toddler slide at McAdams. We currently show that Eagle design that we had several members of the community vote on. They like that. That is one thing that we've kind of looked back to see maybe if there's another design that would look better there, but there is going to be a toddler slide. Everything else you've seen is what you get.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Claycomb, who I think served on the, you can come back. You have more.
You're finished?
I think Councilmember Claycomb worked on the original aquatics committee.
Yeah, I was on park board at that time, so thanks. I have a question on, I want to go back to slide number 23, please. And I don't know exactly who's going to be able to answer this question, either Brian or Gary. If you look at, it's the page with the dollars on it.
Sorry, we'll get there.
It's okay. That one, this one. Okay, and so Gary, you talked about there not being artist costs in there, and I understand that. If I'm calculating this correctly, we have $22 million in the budget right now. This phase one is a little over $14 million, right? Phase one? What's being asked for today?
Well, that's the budget we're asking for, because, so, I might tell you again, the $12.8 million that we're asking for today is not what we would need to cover phase one. It's because of what the allocation is in 2019. To make this a little bit cleaner, we're just asking for that full amount now.
Okay.
To make sure this is some pretty unique work that we don't do very often, and we think we have really good estimates. I don't expect at all that we're going to spend $14 million on phase one, or we're really in trouble on phase two.
Yeah, because I'm like, then we got $8 million left for phase two, and it's a big piece. Okay.
Budget-wise, we thought it made some sense to just get that full amount right now.
Okay.
We'll bid the phase one projects. Anything else that's still there stays in. When we bring in the balance for phase two, then it'll total still that same amount.
Still that, okay. And then I know you addressed this about the artist cost not being in here right now, and you use College Hill as an example. So what you're saying is that once we get to phase two, that 1.5 million will be broken out between base and artist cost.
That's our anticipation at this point in time, yes.
All right, thank you.
We'll go back to Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment as well staff as well as the artists who put these plans together. I think it greatly enhances the curb appeal of all of these facilities, makes them much more playful and inviting, welcoming. I think they'll be very excited kids and teenagers for the facility improvements to the facilities. I think they make a statement about great public spaces in our community. So I'm very excited about it, and I can't wait to see them finished.
And I want to add that this was a long process. I mentioned that Councilmember Claycomb and I believe Councilmember Fry served on the park board when this first was initiated, and it was a committee that made their initial recommendation, and so it is with an enthusiastic yell that the community should be pretty happy about this. The reality is, this is another case where we did not take the committee's recommendation. We pushed back against the committee because the committee originally simply had us with 3 pools in this city. And we did not take the committee's recommendation. We pushed back on that. And I think we can now say we're guilty of listening to the community, because we did alter that plan and kept a number of pools and added to the aquatics playground in this city that really is going to give neighborhoods an opportunity that they would not have received if we would have taken the original committee recommendation. And so I think at the end of the day, the process worked as it was intended to. We evaluated the committee's recommendation. We pushed back against the recommendation. We came up with what we think is a better plan, and the community was able to provide us with their input. And so I am happy to make the motion that the City Council approve the Phase 1 aesthetic design, revised budget, adopt the amending resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
2020 arterial water mains.
Good morning again, Mayor and council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning is a request for funding for 2020 arterial water mains. The adopted capital improvement program includes annual funding for projects involving replacement or relocation of water lines specifically located within arterial street right-of-way. And that work is due to conflicts with proposed improvements or placement due to age, history, or leak, material or leak history, I'm sorry. The funding for 2020 for this particular item will allow main replacement or relocation with the following projects: the baseball stadium and the McLean realignment, which is underway right now, 17th Street North, Broadway to I-135, and improvements to Mount Vernon from Broadway to Southeast Boulevard. Both of those projects are scheduled to bid before the end of the year and be under construction by early 2020. The adopted CIP includes $2.5 million in 2020 for this work, which staff recommends initiating all at this time. With that, staff recommends City Council approve the project, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. This is riveting stuff here, folks. Any other discussion? I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agreement amendment with the Greater Wichita Partnership for Economic Development Services.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. Scott Rigby, City Manager's Office. The item before you is an amendment to the current business service agreement we have with the Greater Wichita Partnership. Just to recap, back in 2013, the city entered into a 5-year contract with Gwedic at that time for annual cost of $300,000. And later, in late 2015, Gwedic, or Greater Wichita Economic Development Corporation, was merged into now what's called the Greater Wichita Partnership. And in March of 2018, the City Council approved a new 5-year agreement at an annual funding level of $300,000. Just a recap of what Greater Wichita Partnership's mission is a threefold strategic priorities, which is jobs, talent, quality of place, and with their goal of bringing these common strategies fast-forwarding Wichita and the south central Kansas area to greater economic prosperity. And they partner with us on business retention and expansion visits, key research, business community connections. They also help us with attraction efforts as we try and compete with the rest of the nation. Just some notable performances from Greater Wichita Partnership. Since 2015, they've had over $2.2 a role in over $2.2 billion in new capital investment within the region, over $335 million of total annual payroll, and over 7,500 jobs announced, over 53 projects since that time. And you'll see those, some of the major ones listed below. I won't go through each of these. These are in your packet of their 2019 report. But they measure their activity and their successes across a number of them, which we talked about: job numbers, capital investment, annual payroll, number of business retention and expansion visits. And that's an important one because, as most people in the economic development world, most of your job growth happens within your existing business community. And that's where, especially, we see that here in Wichita. It's probably closer to 90% of our growth happens through our existing companies. The other one that they work on is to how do we garner additional attraction and interest in Wichita from people who are outside the region who are considering new projects across the country. So they'll do site selector visits. They'll do working on sending information out to have people have an understanding of what Wichita and what the region can provide and benefits they can provide to their businesses. We discussed these briefly back in 2018. I'll just go over those real quickly. They had 4 key initiatives that they were going to work on over the next 5 years to push the region forward. One was a BREG, or a Blueprint for Regional Economic Growth Strategic Update. They went through that process over the last 2 years. That has been completed. That review has now been updated into what's now called the Regional Growth Plan. That consolidated into 8 primary industries. In addition, the next one is the Global Talent Research. One of the things we hear from our companies, not only here locally, but as we talk to companies who are considering relocating from other places outside of Wichita, talent is a key aspect of that. How do we prove to our existing businesses as well as outside the community businesses that we have the talent, or we can attract the talent to fill those business openings? So they contracted with a national firm, DCI out of New York, who is leading that research and marketing strategy effort and is currently implementing that effort today. In addition, Project Downtown, many of you are a part of this as far as what's next for our community. The strategic and listening and engagement process will continue for the foreseeable future as they work to identify what those goals for the region for the next 10 years are. And then lastly, as we see our downtown continue to redevelop and grow, they periodically bring in consultants to relook or reevaluate the progress of our downtown, whether it's for residential or for commercial or hospitality. In this example, they'll bring back a consultant to relook at our residential community and our downtown, particularly since we've had such a strong growth in multifamily in the downtown. In addition to these, the reason we're bringing this amendment forward is back in early 2018, as we went through the city's budget process, staff initiated an idea to consolidate all of our economic development contracts into a single economic development contract with Greater Wichita Partnership in lieu of a separate contract for the Kansas Global, which was doing export, Laura Alvarez, which was doing Mexico, and then WeWill, which was doing small business development. Instead of having those independent of the Greater Wichita Partnership, we decided to bring those under one umbrella and have a Greater Wichita Partnership provide that umbrella for us. And the other goal for that is to make sure all of these initiatives are aligned with the regional growth plan and that they are structured to align and further those strategic goals as outlined. The amendment is for this year only, 2019. It's an increase from $300,000 to $500,000, $550,000. Sorry, for just the 2019 budget. Staff and GWP staff are continuing to work on strategic outcome goals for the following years, for the remainder of the 4-year that remain in the current contract. And we expect to come back to council at the end of this year to discuss those strategic initiatives and outcome focus goals. Just a little additional background. The GWP Executive Board is composed of representatives from the city, county, as well as members of the community like the Chamber, Wichita State, and other private entities. And then key for our use of city funding, this is the same with the county, is that our funding is used solely for operating costs, for marketing, advertising, travel, consultants, and costs associated with recruiting new businesses, but they cannot use it for personnel costs. And over the last several years, we've seen their increase of private funding. in lieu of public funding. We expect that, and they are indicating that as the region continues to grow in enthusiasm, their private interest in investing in Greater Wichita Partnership continues to grow. And we expect that to continue. And they're a great partner with us, and thus we are recommending the City Council approve the agreement amendment for economic development services with the Greater Wichita Partnership and authorize the necessary signatures. I stand for questions as well as the representatives from the Greater Wichita Partnership here who can answer any specific contract, any specific details about their services.
So before I hand it off to the Vice Mayor, I understood you to say this is just backfilling our 2019 contractual agreement that we have already said we would do.
In 2000, we went to the Greater Wichita Partners and said, can you take on these additional responsibilities with these three existing contracts?
So that was kind of a yes or no answer.
Yes, they're taking on the services that we previously contracted directly with those three agencies. They've taken those responsibilities on.
For the 2019?
For the 2019. And then they can evaluate, and we'd love to be part of that, reevaluate, how do we move forward? Do we continue with those contracts?
Share with us why we're almost at the end of 2019 and we're just now approving our 2019 obligations. Why didn't this come to us at the beginning of 2019?
Thanks, Mayor, for the question. When we started the budget process, we anticipated we'd be simply under our budget agreement that we could continue to fund them up to the additional level. But when we went back and researched our actual agreement that was signed back in 2018, it had a cap of $300,000. So in order to increase their scope of services that they would be providing to us, in order for us to increase our funding, it requires us to come back and make this amendment.
And we could have made this amendment at the first of 2019 when we made the obligation.
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. We could have. We thought we had an open-ended contract for services, and it wasn't. And good news is our finance department caught that we had a cap in the contract and said we could not exceed the cap, and that's why we're bringing it to you.
All right. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, you'd indicated that staff had initiated splitting the funding off, and can you kind of give me historically what the split has been here with WEBA and Kansas Global and Malero Alvarez?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I'll speak to our most recent independent contracts with these groups, and then I'll ask Jeff for Greater Wichita Partnership, who can talk about the 2019 contracts they struck with these same agencies. So when we had these responsibilities directly with each of these three agencies, our 2018 contracts with each of these was Malero Alvarez was for a total of $150,000.
Well, that was last year?
For 2018.
2018.
When we had these responsibilities under the city's purview.
Okay.
In 2018, WEBA's was $125,000.
Okay.
And Kansas Global was $200,000.
Okay.
And I can invite Jeff Fuller with the partnership who can talk about.
Just before you hand it off.
Sure.
So Kansas Global went from $200,000 in 2018 to $40,000 this year. Is that correct?
I believe so. That better be answered by Jeff Fuller with the partnership.
Okay. I'm just trying to identify where we're at because, and we look at all the deliverables. I've been on some of these trips with Malero. They're not local, correct? Where are they out of?
They're based out of Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, they're out of Arizona. So we went on some trips with them, and I'm trying to look at the direct deliverables we get. I look at Kansas Global stats. What they're doing is what everybody's doing is important, but what they're particularly doing, where they're going into training companies right here in Wichita to export a product that they weren't. That's what Wichita is known for. That's what we're all about, is exporting products out of here. So we want to train as many companies as we can to deliver to a market, get a good out of here that we're not doing. And I see they've done $36 million, does that sound correct? In product that companies were not sending out before, but they did after the training?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I'll.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking at from some information Kansas Global shared.
Okay.
And then I try to understand, why would we cut them to $40,000? If that's, to me, that's producing the most good. So, yeah, if Jeff would like to speak to this, I'd like to speak to what the deliverables were with Malero Alvarez compared to Kansas Global and what the city's really getting in return. Good morning, City Manager, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. Jeff Fleur, Great Wichita Partnership, 501 East Douglas Avenue. Be glad to answer your questions, Mr. Vice Mayor, because we worked with the city, the staff, on how, when we went from the larger number to almost half, how we would begin to allocate those dollars, and be glad to walk through that with you. When you approved the $250,000 in your 19 budget, the partnership actually passed 100% of that money through to these three organizations. So we took on the management of these service agreements without any additional funding coming from the city to be able to do that. We also, as part of this, did in-kind because we knew that these different organizations were taking a reduction. And so we did that, $10,000 in kind to both Kansas Global and WEBA. And basically that was investment that they were making into the partnership on an annual basis. So we actually told them we would do that in kind versus them investing in the partnership as we move forward. So in addition to that $250,000, we also took a reduction in investment to try to help them in this transitional year as we look at it as being a transition year to kind of figure out how we want to continue to move forward. And then also, part of what we did is we worked with your team, the city manager and his staff, on how is it that we wanted to develop measurables around these three groups, because we had not, up to this point, managed them. We had worked with them on different projects, but as far as working with them on deliverables, what they could be able to do to further a regional economic development plan, that had not been our role. So we did work with them to come up with these different agreements. So what we agreed to do for 19 was that the agreement with WEBA would be an $85,000 contract. Their goals and measures are really focused on employees 50 and below. And that's a critical part because it's a lot of small business. The partnership typically focuses on companies with 50 employees or larger. So with WEBA coming to the agreement, there was an opportunity to really kind of have more of a holistic view, if you will, or a touch point with our business community. This agreement with WEBA provides an opportunity to expand and align what we call business retention and expansion. And Scott mentioned that local expansions, especially in Wichita, are a big part of the growth and job opportunities that we see here. So again, we feel like that was really important. In further alignment, we also worked with WEBA so that when they were going out to companies, we did just pass or actually complete the regional growth plan this last year. That actually took BREG, which was a huge initiative, and really made it more targeted. So we got into 7 target industry sectors. So when working with WEBA and developing who they would actually be visiting with, we really targeted in on what are those sectors that the regional growth plan says we have probability of expansions or growth. And so their touch points really became even more focused on what that regional growth plan was telling us would be opportunities to go forward. Certainly, I think things that we're going to see coming from WEBA as we work with them through the end of the year is that what are the things that they've actually been able to identify with small business that is hindering them from growing? Are they getting connected to all the resources that we have available as a community, as a city, to make sure they can grow? So those are several things that will be growing and actually getting from them that will help us, I think, with small business development. With Kansas Global, it is a $40,000 contract. And again, this was not something that was easily done. We were really trying to figure out. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yes,
you
sir.
said we cut them in half. We actually cut them by 80%, from 200,000 to 40,000.
Well, and again, sir, what we were doing is working with the money that we were given to be able to work through this. Okay. And actually working with your team is trying to decide, okay, how is it that this is a transitional year. We're not saying it's this way going into 2020, because what we want to do is be able to say, what is it that we garnered this year? You know, what is it that we're seeing? What are areas that should be adjusted? I mean, that's all part of our conversation.
So we're going to take money away from training companies on how to export a product to get it out of Wichita. So let's talk about Alvarez, Malero Alvarez, and see what benefit that we're going to get from them that is more important than training companies on how to export their product out of Wichita.
And again, what we're trying to do, sir, was work through the agreement, and with Malero Alvarez, again, a group that the city had been working on. Every one of these groups you all have been working with as a city. So part of our thought was continuity in this transition year is important because it helps us understand what have they done in the past, where are we currently, and where do we have opportunity. One of the things that we looked at with foreign direct investment, because we understand that that's something that is an opportunity for us, and we wanted to try to
further catalyze that area to see what the opportunities would be going forward. We just got back from San Antonio, where a big part of their economic development has been relationships with Japan. And so part of it is how is it that we investigate what the opportunities are, determine, okay, is there merit there for us to continue in this way? And so with Alvarez in his company, one of the things that we wanted to do is look beyond Mexico. We wanted to look at actually expanding what are the opportunities in Canada. And part of that, certainly we just had a delegation that went down to Mexico. Our Vice President of Economic Development was able to go, along with Kansas Global. Tyler was on that trip. And so we actually got on the ground in Mexico to kind of see, okay, firsthand, what are the opportunities there? What are the ways that not only can we take companies and begin to do exports, but how is it that we can maybe have foreign direct investment? So
we're going to Mexico and trying to get Mexico to invest in our economy through foreign direct investment?
We're doing it both ways.
Okay, do we have any example, have we able to land anything yet to where a group in Mexico is investing money in Wichita in some kind of development? Or?
We actually have, on this trip, when they went down about a month ago, there are actually 2 opportunities that are looking at coming into Wichita to do like they would normally do. They would come in and look at us further to see, based upon what they've started to see in their initial analysis, does it make sense for them to make an investment or partner in Wichita? I don't have that answer. I mean,
what would that look like, just so the public kind of understands? I mean, would they be building a factory here in Wichita or some kind of service business, or just trying to understand?
Sure.
What that would look like.
And actually, I would, at this moment, I think it would be great to bring Andrew Nave up because he was actually on the trip. The other thing I want to mention as Andrew comes up is that we also, with Miller Alvarez this year, wanted to explore Canada. We wanted to know, okay, are there other opportunities in multiple countries for us to be looking at? There is aerospace in Canada. There's opportunities there. So one of the things that we have coming up would be a trip to Canada, actually Montreal, Ottawa, to really look at what are the opportunities there, which is something we haven't been doing in the past. So actually part of this year was exploration to say, okay, are there opportunities there? And ultimately what we want to do is through this year's analysis is really come back to you all and say, here's what we're seeing. We've been, here's what we've engaged in this year. This is how we've worked with WEBA. This is how we worked with Kansas Global. This is how we work with Miller Alvarez. Here's some of the opportunities we see. Here's some of the things that we feel like maybe we ought to explore further. And here's would be that recommendation. But ultimately, it's what you all want to see. I mean, this is your investment into exports, FDI, and small business. Again, this money is not going into the partnership for our initiatives. It's actually complementing them. But the $250,000 is going straight through to these organizations and not the partnership as far as the initiatives that we're doing. But Andrew, why don't you give the Vice Mayor a little bit more information, please?
Happy to.
Thanks, Andrew.
Vice Mayor, the conversations we had 5 foreign direct investment appointments with a variety of companies, 4 of them being manufacturers, 1 of them being a wholesale distributor, about evaluating the central U.S. and specifically Wichita for future investments. 2 of the companies, one was in the trailer parts kind of manufacturing space, is interested in visiting Wichita to take that next step of evaluation to see if there's, whether it's a greenfield site, could be a joint venture. We've had numerous joint venture opportunities in the past. Fijiac is probably the most well-known over the last couple of years, where a foreign-owned entity comes in and acquires or partners with a Wichita-based company to continue their expansion. So that's certainly a possibility. But at this stage, both of those companies that have expressed an interest to come now inbound to Wichita and evaluate our market, that would be the next step that we're at. Does that answer your question?
And again, Andrew will be traveling to Montreal and Ottawa. And again, working with the Kansas Global with FDI as well. I mean, there is a relationship that we work with those 2 together as far as exports and then FDI. And so where we see opportunity with this in this transition year actually is really getting a clarity on the opportunities that we've talked about already. Small business exports, foreign direct investment. And then also is how is it that we garner potentially what we see as these opportunities and these resources? How do we make them go further? One of the things that we have seen with our private sector investment, and Scott noted that when we started back in April of 2015, our annual investment for the private sector was about 1.23. This year, it's going to round out probably about 1.8. The reason that's happening is that we do have the regional growth plan, we do have the marketing blueprint for talent, we do have Project Downtown, we do have the whole Project Wichita initiative. So the strategies are known, and so now it's how is it that we mobilize? How do we accelerate? How do we really move these things forward to grow the economy and grow the opportunity? There's a lot of things that we can do, but we want to be very targeted in what we're doing too, because we know there's limited resources, and we want to leverage, sir, what you all are investing, and we want to do it in the right way, the best we know how. So the other thing that's happening right now is that we need to be of note is what's happening with commerce on the state level. And what we're seeing with David Tolan, the secretary, is that you see the secretary really building the resources of commerce, which is really important. On one of the slides, it talked about pipeline. So what are the opportunities that we're seeing as a community? Some of those we're going to be generating ourselves, but there's also a pipeline that comes through commerce that is coming in from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And based upon what that project is, they then in turn contact us, and then we begin to work in the region, the 10-county region now. Where's the best place for that? What's the highest probability of our success as a region in landing that opportunity? So with Secretary Tolan, he's actually now really increasing in North America the state's presence again with site selectors. And they typically are in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, West Coast. Some of you have traveled with us to those individuals to meet with them, because I think that's a really important thing to do as well. We're going to be bringing some in this year. The other thing that Secretary Tolan is doing is looking at foreign direct investment. What do we need to be doing there? What are the opportunities? So as the Secretary works on that, we actually are going to be meeting with him to say, how is it that we as the largest city, region in this state, partner with them in some capacity potentially, so that we increase opportunities to be able to come into South Central Kansas. The other aspect that the state's doing right now is the Kansas Framework for Growth. This is the state's first economic development strategy since 1986. Now, David understands the importance of us moving quickly because other states are. And his goal is that by year end, we will have a draft of that document. So what are the opportunities that may be there? So my point being is that I think this has been a strategic step forward to really understand where are we today with these various groups, but how do they fit into some of the things that we're doing in the broader analysis? How is it as we go into 2020, if you also elect to do this, again, in that time period, how is it that we invest? And then how is it with certainty? And the other part of it is how is it we may be able to leverage that? Because if people understand, here's why we're doing what we're doing, I have seen it unlock the private sector in their investment. It's been demonstrated. So actually this year, as hard as it's been for these organizations, and I understand, I mean, I really do. I work with budgets, you work with budgets. But this year has been one of transition to really try to get our arms around how is it that we effectively and tactically go forward? How is it that we accelerate what we know we need to do? And I think...
One thing I want to say.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt you. But, you know, during such a transitional year, wouldn't it be a great opportunity for us to sharpen our metric a little bit? You know, I mean, until we're really measuring what we're doing, you know, we really don't know what we're gaining and where we're getting ahead. Don't you think that'd be a great opportunity?
I don't disagree with you, sir. And that's one of the things that when we point back to like the partnership area, you know, our core measures are dealing with job creation, whether it's through attraction, retention, or expansions. And that there's been over 7,500 jobs, not 5 years in, that have been created or retained. We have seen over $2.2 billion of capital investment in Wichita in this region. And the annual payroll has increased over $330 million. Those are all hard measures, and we agree with you. I think that's what's unlocking the private sector. The city manager actually gave me a document just within the last 2 weeks, Minneapolis-St. Paul, great measurements. And I think that you're correct. I think that as we go forward, it's how is it that activity is important? I mean, it cultivates opportunity, but how do you translate the opportunity into reality? And that's what we've got to do better with. And I don't disagree with you, sir. And I think, you know, anytime y'all can help us with that, we want that, because in the end of the day, that helps us sell our community because the unknowns are known. I was with a company last night looking at a 100,000 square foot expansion, new growth. It got down to what are the other measures in this community that indicate to us that we ought to do it here. And that's, you're getting ready to go with us to MPAA. And, you know, we've got companies there. You and Councilmember Frye are both going to go with us. It's important that we drive that home. So all that.
Just to the mayor's point.
Yes, sir.
Would have been so much more beneficial if we could have had this discussion in January, because now it's all seems more retroactive. I know we can't change that, but well, we can in the future.
Yes, sir. And we'd want to do that, sir. So honestly, you know, again, here's something that's, I just want to leave you with these two things, because I think it demonstrates economic development very well. Back in 2017, Mr. Gentile with Spirit announced we're going to do $1,000 new jobs, $1 billion of investment. Your team, our team, the state's team, they were all heavily engaged in that to see that become a reality. Because of the momentum of that company and what was happening in our economy here in the environment, last December, we weren't necessarily in the same capacity, but Mr. Gentile announced 1,200 more jobs. That comes out of the environment of what's happening here, the opportunity to get talent, because talent's a big issue. WSU Tech helped Spirit be able to do that. The other example I would give would be Cargill. You know, Cargill, several years ago, we almost lost them, and that was real. I mean, people may ask, was it really? Yes, it was. And we were fighting against Tier 1 cities. So Texas, Colorado, serious markets. But we were able, as a community, to come together and rally and keep Cargill. So that was the retention of approximately 800 well-paying jobs, and they've invested over $70 million on Douglas Avenue. And what was exciting was that at the ribbon cutting last December, Mr. Sykes, as they were talking about the process, the new building, actually announced over 100 new jobs. That again, because of that company, where they want to go, and the fact that they see opportunity in Wichita, took that step. That is part of what we do too, is that we cultivate an environment where, yes, when you see an opportunity to expand or you see a retention that needs to happen, you mobilize and get it done. But you also create an environment where people can expand and you may not have to touch it. You want that as well. So I think it's full circle of everything that we're working on. We appreciate the partnership with you. Look, this has been a crazy ride since 2015. I mean, to look at how economic development has been reorganized, how we now look at it from downtown to 10 counties. We've got a great regional presence. I know the mayor has been working in the region for years.
Mr. Fleur,
Yes.
I don't want to cut you off.
Yes, sir.
But we have more questions.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You're probably going to get a chance to continue to
Okay.
talk.
Sounds good, sir.
Are we paying him by the word?
I tell you, it's part of the excitement, Mayor, of what's going on. So
I get it.
I was wrapping up. I'm sorry. So other questions? Yes, sir.
Councilmember Claycomb.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to say that I heard Secretary Tolan speak this weekend at the
Yes,
League
ma'am.
of Kansas Municipalities, and I'm very excited about the direction.
Yes, ma'am.
And he talked about the partnership with the cities moving forward and what they're doing. So I think we're going to see some great things happen
Yes,
from
ma'am.
that. I also just want to say that last year when we made this change, I think one of the things we asked you to do was really look at the alignment of economic development initiatives and outcomes.
Yes, ma'am.
And it appears to me that you're working that direction, so
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate that. My question really is for Bob. Manager, if you could remind us, in 2018, for 2019, we were facing some real budget issues, and this is one of the areas where we made changes and asked the partnership to work with us to be able to make this transition. Could you just remind us of that process, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. If you remember at the time, we were projecting a deficit in our economic development fund within the next few years. And so we needed to do some things differently in our funding of economic development initiatives. So as part of the 2019 budget approved in 2018, you reduced the amount of money that was spent out of our economic development fund and the general fund by $225,000. So when Mr. Fleur talks about less money coming to them, that's because we had a $225,000 reduction. And what we had talked about was, at the time the council approved this and in subsequent discussions, what we asked them to do is work on strategic initiatives for exports, FDI, and small business development. And I think the discussion was to keep the existing agencies for 1 year while they determine what the capacities of those agencies were, and then for 2020, then to make a decision on how they're going to move forward in those 3 key initiative areas, not necessarily talking specifically about the agencies or the methods of delivery, but what the outcomes would be for successful initiatives in exports, FDI, and small business development.
And so we moved that, this part of the budget to the partnership so that we could get better alignment on economic development projects and initiatives, as opposed to the city piecemealing it out.
Right,
here
and there was never
there.
a tie, even back in the GWDC days, there never was a real tie between their desired outcomes or goals and our funding of these agencies.
Yeah, so we've asked them to take that
The coordination.
responsibility over. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor. I guess for me, just listening to this, I share some of the concerns of the Vice Mayor, and if we've reduced the budget of Kansas Global from $200,000 to $40,000, and then we're talking about building metrics afterwards, we're gonna build metrics on an 80% loss, so they may not be as effective as they probably were before working within these new guidelines. And to me, that's just a bit of a concern.
It would be going forward, sir. What we were looking at this year was, okay, based upon, and we had those agreements for you all, okay, we need you to continue to render these areas of services for us this year. As we kind of work through that, and then looking because again, this year is one to get our arms around how we want to do, where is it we want to go, and then how we want to execute. And so to that end, where we are at this point is working with each of them who have, and they're making progress on, all of them are making progress on the things we've asked them to do. The next step in this process will be for us to really kind of, and again, working with your team, is to say, okay, where do we see the opportunities? Where do we see where we ought to expend more? If it ranges $250,000, how is it that we leverage that? And then we begin to look, sir, as we go to 2020 about, okay, what are the outcomes that we want to be able to see as far as what this translates into? What the activity of business grants and whatever that may be, how does that translate into the job creation or whatever that matrix may be that we deem is the way we want to go with that. And we actually went through a similar process when we started the partnership, honestly. We looked at everything very hard. We actually created a strategic advisory team. The Vice Mayor sits on that. You're going to be a part of this. I mean, that's part, we created that team, sir, so that we could work with Andrew and the group that we have assembled for him to work with to say, how is it that we can be the most effective? And there is a moment where we have to pause sometimes to say, okay, and we may not pause, we have to keep things rolling, but at least look at where is it we want to go with this and how does that translate into the futures of each of these groups or how we want to tackle FDI. All that has to be, I think you have to have a moment like we're doing right now to determine where we want to go.
I just want to make sure that through all of this, because the biggest lesson I got from San Antonio was relationships.
Yes, sir.
And I know that Kansas Global, if they've been doing this for some years, they have those locally, domestically, internationally. Yes, just want to make sure that we can keep those up and then continue to, as the Vice Mayor said, get those exports going and money coming back into Wichita.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, and thank you for all your work, Jeff. It's much appreciated. I'm going to be supportive because this is funds that we've already committed to spending, right? But as we mentioned last week when we had our meeting with you, I'm really concerned just about the outcomes, and I know it's hard, and getting to an actual outcome that you can quantify is challenging, but getting beyond activities and processes is really important. The other thing is I hear the Vice Mayor's concerns that it's November and we're taking care of this now. And so for the 3 partners that you're coordinating on our behalf, again, appreciated, when are we going to find out how much is allocated to them in 2020? Do you understand? Because it's
Yes,
November and we're hearing about it, and it sounds like there's some concern that maybe one of the entities isn't receiving enough funding. So when will we know what the allocation of the funding will be going forward, so it's not in the 11th or 10th or 11th month?
I understand, and that's the process that we're in now, as far as probably the next 45 days of really getting our arms around what is it that we see for 2020, and what can we achieve with the $250,000? That's the other thing.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's a big part of this question is,
we have a finite amount of resources here. So how is it we're going to spend those dollars to leverage them for the highest yield? So those are tough conversations to figure out. Again, the vice mayor with SAT, I mean, it's something that we'll be engaging with that group as well. But I appreciate your comments about outcomes, because we want those as well.
Yeah, and I understand it's a very finite amount of money, but I think probably the angst is that now it's so far into the year, there can't be any suggestions or reallocations. So sooner would be better, I would imagine, for 2020, so that if there are concerns, they can be addressed now. It's kind of too late, if that makes sense. Thank you.
I will note that I think the key between now and when we bring that to you is what you mentioned, and I think all of you have mentioned, and that is transitioning from activity measures to outcome measures. And if you look, I think in fairness to the agencies, when they took them over this year, they right-sized their activity measures, but all three groups, Kansas Global, Valera Alvarez, and WEBA, if you look at what has been submitted to you, they were all just activity measures. Number of meetings, number of trips, number of visits to small businesses. And now what we want to do is determine the effectiveness of those activities. What is it that we're actually, where are we moving the needle in order for how we spend our dollars?
And realistically, what can we expect from the groups? I mean, it's, you know, they, with their staffing and so forth, it's so part of it is because we want to position people for success. And so it's because if we're looking at those outcomes, as we should, future funding is based upon things of that nature. And so we want to make sure that we're establishing what can we achieve, or what can these different service agreements really achieve, and how does that open up new opportunities? So,
Mayor, just one more comment. And you mentioned, Jeff, that if we wanted to help, to let you know, I've written outcome measures for 25 years, so if there's any opportunity for me to be engaged in the process, I'd be happy to help.
We will engage you. Thank you.
Councilmember Clendenin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for taking some wonderfully hard questions. And we're kind of moving into, I think, a stage in the city where we're really wanting to put our foot even heavily on the gas and screech the wheels, right? And get out of here and move forward. As we are moving forward, though, and we're looking at outcomes, and we're kind of reorganizing things in a way, I'd really like, and Mr. Manager, this is also to you, I'd really like to see what the return on our investment is. So we do that with a lot of our economic development deals. What is the return we're getting? It probably isn't fair to kind of ask that question at this point. We've been organizing and getting to this point, but I think in the future it would be great for the community to see, okay, we're investing this much money, what are we getting back? What's expected to get back, that we're expected to get back? To me, that's a very important metric. Depending on the job you bring to Wichita is going to depend on, or the expansion that we have here of our existing businesses. Noting that 25%, I was reminded of this recently, noting that 25% of our economy is dependent on exports, I really do believe the expansion of our local companies is important. I think we heard that even from Scott earlier. And so I want to make sure that as we're looking and we're moving forward, that whatever mechanism, whether it's Kansas Global or it's the Alvarez company, I apologize, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That we're going and we're looking for those companies that are giving this immediate return on investment and being able to help local companies that are already in existence expand and employ people here is extremely important to me. And so I'll be looking forward that in the future as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. And I would note that return on investment is at the core. I mean, that's why we really work with the private sector investment within the partnership itself. That's increased. If you look at the 300 investments, like a 6-to-1 now. And as you think about downtown development, one of the things that we've really been purposeful is how is it you're leveraging the public investment to yield private investment. And we understand your constituents ask you questions, and we want to make sure that we're equipping you with very solid answers on what's going forward. So thank you for your remarks.
Any other questions? Scott, did you have anything else as part of Jeff Fleur's presentation?
I can never keep up.
All right, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item?
Mayor and Vice Mayor Karen Page, 17 East Douglas, Eastboro, Kansas, 67207. I can't remember if you're supposed to say the zip code or not. I just wanted to address a couple of items from Scott and Jeff and Andrew's remarks and presentation, and also some of your questions. I believe as I was listening to the discussion, I believe the issue is one of priority and guidance. The Regional Growth Plan recommended to add foreign direct investment, or FDI, support or activities to our regional growth strategy. That add is important. It was add to the already robust and successful export expansion services. What in effect happened this year, because of a finite amount of resources, and I know we all have finite resources, the decision was made to focus seemingly more on foreign direct investment. In consequence, export expansion services had to be defunded, or something else had to be defunded. So I really respect the process and the decision that GWP needed to make. I think they did the best job that they could. We were, of course, shocked by a slight, quote-unquote, reduction in our contract, but didn't turn out to be slight, but we adjusted. So let me make the point on going from $200,000 to $40,000 in the 5th and final year of the implementation of the export plan. We went from $200,000 to $40,000. In effect, what you got was 1 quarter and no more export plan implementation. So we did 4 years. We've been working on reporting. We've been working with a number of you for many years on our metrics. And our metrics have indeed included activities, because the hundreds of people that helped us put together the export plan requested certain things to happen. For example, they said, we need one place to go to help us with our export services. So that's an activity. When we answer a question, or we direct them to another agency, whether it be GWP or Kansas Department of Commerce or the U.S. Department of Commerce, or to fill out a form so they can export those goods. But our reports have never just included activities, never. Been recognized at the national level by more than one organization for being some of the most robust and informed export metrics in the nation. So they've included not only activities, but where we were in terms of the agreed upon objectives and strategies of the five-year plan. We reported those information quarterly, and each quarter we met, but most likely, or more often exceeded, those strategic and the strategy and the objective targets. We also reported on the total number of exports achieved, because the goal of the plan was 2 parts. One was to increase exports, the other was to diversify exports. So our metrics included whether we were increasing exports or whether we were diversifying exports, and we did both. So I just wanted to mention sort of clarification of those items. The export services that we've been providing have never just included activities, and really with respect to Greater Wichita Partnership, our current contract doesn't as well. We continued with the same metrics that was agreed upon, and I believe that GWP did the best they could. And if you'll allow me to talk to Jeff directly just for a minute, I want to say thanks, Jeff, for paying the $40,000 invoice for the 2nd quarter services. Knowing today that there was an issue with the contract, I really appreciate them taking care of that for us. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything, and I really appreciate you allowing me to speak and to just allow some clarification. I'd also like to thank the city for their leadership in exports. We're still one of the best in the nation, and I hope we can continue with, as Councilmember Clendenin said, let's put our foot on the accelerator and really go forward. We have a really nice foundation. Let's build on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Karen. Any other speakers? No other speakers. Will bring the discussion to the bench. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a question for the city manager. Can you tell me, was this a staff decision or was it a partnership decision on this split?
Ultimately, it was the partnership's decision. They informed us on what they were doing, and we told them that our issue was outcomes and how we got there. And they said, this is what we want to do for this first year, and judge the performance of each of the groups. And then they gave us what the measures would be for each of the agencies.
Thanks. You know, I'm really struggling with this because I am part of the SAT team. I am pro-partnership. And I realize a lot of this stuff, the trips, trying to produce new commerce opportunities for Wichita, it's a lot of trial and error. But this export plan seems to be working. So why in the world are we cutting something that's working by 80%? I mean, the whole deal is supposed to be trial and error. Let's see what works, put more energy into that. So with that being said, and I really don't want to vote against this, but I cannot support when we're taking away what is working.
Any other comments? Councilmember Tuttle?
This is more of a question for the manager, so I just want to make sure I understand, because I'm still new. I'm using that for the full year, okay? It's only 10 months. But this is money that we have already promised that we would pay, and there was essentially kind of a glitch or some sort of issue with the contract, but we've already committed to this funds, and it's in the budget for 19. Am I correct?
It was actually a specific budget issue was isolated in the budget discussion, and yes, the council did approve the additional funding.
Okay, and from what I understood from what Karen said, that they've already been paid by the Greater Wichita Partnership, and it's the Greater Wichita Partnership's understanding then, we're essentially just paying what we said we would pay, but they've already expended the money so that there wasn't an inconvenience for them, correct? Okay, thank you.
So Bob, if I understood you correctly, I understand it's pass-through money for them to make contractual arrangements with these three entities, but you just shared that the partnership made the decision on how much that split was and the funding levels.
They had the internal discussion and discussions with the agencies. Not that, I won't represent that the agencies all agreed with it. I think that's pretty apparent today, but that's the recommendation they brought to us.
So my other concern is what you've continued to hear expressed from the bench and some frustration. I don't know that we have anything truly tangible from the, almost 4 years now we've been working with Malera Alvarez. And so if you look out over the last 3+ years, we are probably approaching somewhere in the range of $500,000 we've paid to them. What has been our return on investment on that $500,000 investment that they've received from Wichita taxpayers? What is something tangible that we can report on that would warrant, their contractual arrangement? And I guess the frustration is what the vice mayor just shared. We were in the 5th year of a recognized working 5-year plan from Kansas Global with, some tangible outcomes. Why defund something so tangible to take a risk on something that was kind of pie in the sky?
Can talk about the initial strategy in terms of using Malera Alvarez. If you remember, we had a significant investment initially in a China initiative, and we had a number of trips to China. We were not having success in terms of translating that into business. And so the decision was made that we needed to look at alternative markets. And so Malera Alvarez had contacts, significant contacts in Mexico, and so we decided that we move in that direction, but we insisted that it be in partnership with Kansas Global, that they not duplicate, especially here in the city, any of the work that's being done by Kansas Global, because we knew that they had the best contacts with companies here in town. So we had initial trips, you participated in those as well, to lay the groundwork in not just traditional places where we've been before, but where we had a greater chance of success for our businesses in manufacturing, specifically around aviation, but also some other manufacturing areas. I think we did have some businesses that were successful in developing relationships in Mexico in the first couple of years. There was a change in leadership at Malera Alvarez, and we've had a difficult time, I would be candid with you to say, in the last year, getting the kind of information that we need to show exactly what you're asking for, and that's a return on investment. That's not the fault of the partnership or us for that matter. It's a matter of deficiency with Malera Alvarez. We've had those discussions with the partnership, and I think that will impact the relationship with them going forward. But they have opened some doors. They have, and the shift, as Mr. Floor talked about today, the shift was to try to double down on foreign direct investment, feeling that we weren't making any headway in there. We had in that area. We had a report that talked about the value of FDI to this region, and nothing to show for it because we didn't have the resources going into any FDI initiative. So that was the gamble, so to speak, and that was the shift in emphasis that came forward this past year.
Any other questions? So Vice Mayor, I understand your frustration. We're still, I feel obligated to pay our 2019 expenses, and this is kind of after the fact. Now, as frustrated as we all are on really what is the supplemental portion of the Greater Wichita Partnership, I don't want people thinking that we're totally frustrated with the partnership. I think since their inception in 2015, the partnership has helped us do some really good things. You heard Jeff Fleur mention some of those, including keeping Cargill, seeing the expansion happen at Spirit, seeing more jobs come into our community. The partnership's done good work. But as you can tell, and I'm speaking to the partnership now, there's some frustration that we didn't have enough input on the front side of some of this. And I get it, we handed it off to you. I mean, what is the balance? We said, all right, we're handing this off to the partnership, let them make the decisions. At the same time, we're frustrated because we didn't get to help make those decisions. And so I get frustration from both sides, and sounds like, you know, we're talking out of a little bit of both sides of our mouth, but at the end of the day, we're still accountable to taxpayers. And that's where our frustration comes in. And, you know, we've been screaming for more outcomes-based metrics for as long as I know Vice Mayor's been on this council, and that's been his big push, is how can we revise our contracts to be more outcome-based. I know that Karen Page knows this very well because we have pushed her every year for more outcomes-based metrics. And so just want to make it very clear, the partnership's done great work. Are we a little frustrated over the supplemental portion of this? Absolutely. But that shouldn't detract from what we've been able to do in this community over the last 4 years, because there's been some good things accomplished. Councilmember Tuttle?
I was remiss, and I forgot to mention one thing. I did also want to thank the partnership, because I was not aware until this time that you are managing these contracts essentially on our behalf and not taking an administration fee, which is pretty uncommon in the world that I come from. So I did want to pause and say thank you for doing that, and thank you for your work and your commitment to our city.
If there's no other comments or discussion, I would move that we, City Council approve the amended contract for economic development services for the Greater Wichita Partnership and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Just reminding people, this is for obligations for 2019. So we're really backfilling contracts that we've formally said that we want to move forward. Just wanted to make that clarification. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. The motion passes 6-1. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
medium voltage electrical system upgrade, Phase 6, project budget adjustment, supplemental agreement number 1, Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport.
Mayor, City Council, excuse me, John Oswald, Airport Engineering and Planning Manager. Project I wish to present today to you is the Airport Medium Voltage Electrical Upgrade Project Phase 6. On Eisenhower National Airport's campus, the Airport Authority owns and operates electrical distribution system. This project, which is tagged Phase 6, is the last major phase to upgrade and modernize the electrical distribution system. Major elements of this project will be to replace electrical equipment and cabling, install an an emergency generator for the airport police and fire station, and replace street lights along Airport Road. Construction cost is just over $3 million. It will take about a year to construct. We expect the work to begin this fall. One of the challenges that we're up to is to plan and coordinate with our tenants, including the consultant and the contractor, to ensure minimal disruption when there are power outages for the facilities, regardless of the day of the week or the time of the day. Professional Engineering Consultants is providing engineering services. Construction bid, as you heard earlier in a presentation, was $3,133,864. Consultant services are $613,531. Have a contingency administration for the project to $222,605, providing a budget of $3,970,000. Project will be fully paid for from airport revenues. It is recommended the Wichita Airport Authority approve the project budget, approve the contract, and authorize the necessary signatures. I'm available for questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, John, just real quick.
Yes, sir.
You said the replacement of street lights on Airport Road.
Yes.
How far does that extend to the north? Because I've noticed up near Kellogg, quite a few of the street lights have been out over the last several months.
Pueblo is our plan right now. We in West Evergy have been talking about how far to take it to the north, but our plan is to stop it on the north side of Pueblo, which is an intersection by Eagle Med, and extend it all the way south to the loop road around the terminal.
Okay.
The frontage road on Kellogg Drive would be Evergy's responsibility.
Okay, that was actually more of Eisenhower Airport Road from Pueblo and north to Kellogg is where I've seen a lot of the outages.
Now, we're talking about the old airport road, the original road, not Eisenhower Parkway.
Okay.
In this project, in 2021, we plan on working on the Eisenhower Parkway streetlight system in another project.
Thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes, Councilmember Claycomb.
I have a question. I was, in reading this, so what was the original budget on this project? Or was there, or is this the budget?
We're studying the budget now.
Okay, and then.
Once we have the construction bids in and the consultant fees in, now we're able to right-size the budget.
Okay, and then staff's also recommending a change order limit to be increased to $155,000?
Yes, which is 5% of the construction cost.
Okay, so it could be 3.97.
No, we'll stay within the budget.
Just the change orders?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So while you're there, I mean, the green sheet shows that the project budget increased $770,000.
Correct.
And you're saying that was always part of the budget?
Over half of that amount was in our CIP for this project, never initiated till today. The balance was to, as I mentioned, to right-size the project, taking into consideration the construction bids, the engineering fees, and a contingency we feel is appropriate for the project.
So are we getting into just the semantics of an increase there? It was already budgeted for nearly $4 million. We just didn't include it initially with all of the fees you just said. Or did the project increase? We're trying to figure out, it says the project increased. Why did the project increase?
We had initially instituted a budget smaller than this to take care of initial fees such as consultant services. We intentionally held back asking for authorization for the full fees, the full budget, until the project bids came in. This is somewhat an unusual project, and we didn't want to pardon the phrase, take a stab in the dark. We wanted to make sure we had proper consultant fees and construction costs, and then we could focus on the budget and not guessing at it 6 months ago or a year ago, for example.
And all of the monies that are needed to fulfill this obligation you have available
Yes,
in
sir.
the airport fund.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
That's the most important part. All right.
Yes, airport revenues.
Any other questions, concerns? Thank you. We'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any other questions? I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Clendenin, did you have a comment? You're good? All right, cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Approval for council members James Clendenin and Brian Fry to attend the Community Leaders of America, October 16th through 18th, 2019, Frisco, Texas.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to, for the record, point out that this travel is funded by the CLA.
Okay. I would move that we approve council members James Clendenin and Brian Fry to attend the CLA meeting in Frisco, Texas.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Approval of travel for Vice Mayor Jeff Blueball and Councilmember Brian Fry to attend the National Business Aviation Association Convention and Exhibition, October 21st through 22nd, 2019, Las Vegas, Nevada.
And I will make the motion to approve that travel and want to add in there, thank you both for your commitment. People think traveling's glamorous, and in this case, it's
a red eye.
So it really is a sacrifice that both of these people are making on behalf of our community to try and help our community grow jobs right here in Wichita. So thank you both for your willingness. You're not getting paid extra for this, just want you to know. But your willingness to step up and help our community, and this is one great example of how all of the council members step up from time to time to take on extra assignments or extra tasks to do more than just the bare minimum of representing this community. And so I'm happy to make the motion to approve the travel, and we're going to include round trip in that.
Yeah, you don't want me in Vegas longer than that.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Any, let's cover appointments first. Any appointments today? Okay. I don't have any either at this point. Any comments? Councilmember Fry.
I would just like to recognize that several council members today are wearing ribbons for Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes, appreciate you pointing that out. And any other comments? Seeing no other comments, thank you all. I know that, well, I am going to put Councilmember Claycomb on the spot. So Councilmember Claycomb and myself were able to attend the League of Kansas Municipalities, and Wichita won something for the very first time through the league. And Councilmember Claycomb, do you mind explaining that?
Yes, we were recognized for the Civic Engagement Academy, and we won the Community Health Award from the League of Kansas Municipalities. So it was a very nice ceremony and good recognition. So thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for attending and representing us in that capacity, and it was a good conference, and would encourage others anytime they can attend conferences of like nature to do that. I would move that we adjourn today's council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you all.